Hey, what's going on, guys? Happy Sunday. Hope you guys are having a great day. What's up, Ryan?
I'm not much. I mean, I'm just happy. I'm actually happy it's Sunday for how much stuff has gone on this weekend. And funnily enough, I'm bringing up volume right now because you said maybe they won't bring it up. And then Lacquer comes in here. Hey, hope they got the volume dialed in this time. First thing that comes out from chat.
I told you. What's going on? Who can't?
Chris.
You can't hear who?
Chris.
Chris.
Jokes aren't funny.
Yeah, whatever.
Jokes aren't funny.
Well, where's that band button again?
I think
Just messing with
right click. Right click and then block user.
That's hilarious.
So what do we got? And chat, if you do have something screwed up, or not you, us, if the volume's messed up, please do tell us, because
definitely let us know.
We want to get this better, and we're going to get it better, but it's just a perpetual screw up until we get to that point.
Yeah, it's all good.
So we were just talking, we got some updates for Mwave. That's a good place to start.
Yeah. Then we'll jump into our topic tonight. So what do we got happen with Mwave?
Mwave is going to be, the biggest news right now is Seymour Screens just signed on.
Nice.
So Chris from Seymour Screens and I had a conversation on yesterday, one of those days. This is how busy my weekend was. I can't even remember what happened over yesterday. So him and I had a conversation, and pretty sure that they're going to bring multiple 150-inch screens. One of them, at least at this point, now we got to follow up on this and we got to dial everything in with them still. Yeah. But at this point, we're going to have one basic screen, and then I think we're going to have another one that's multiple variable masking.
Oh, so serious? That would be cool to see.
I think that would be very cool. Yeah, so people can actually see aspect ratio changes live. We talked about, and I'm not sure that this is going to happen, we talked about also bringing some demo screens where we can put acoustically transparent material and different materials in front of speakers and have the other speaker not behind it, so people can walk back and forth and really feel and see what it's like and what the screen does to the sound. And I think that's invaluable. So Chris and I had a long conversation at some point over the weekend. Again, I can't remember when exactly that was, but I'm really excited to have Chris and Seymour Screens coming. And Chris said he's coming. So that's a big player in the industry. He'll be a welcome participant at Mwave. So
I actually start my setup, 14, 15 years ago. I started off with Elite, which they're going to be there. Yeah. They're sending us two of their 150-inch screens, because that was one of the biggest complaints we had when we did the projector shootout is, we were comparing all these high-end projectors and low-end projectors and seeing how they compare, but we were doing it on a 100-inch screen. So everybody was saying, man, we wish you could have got like big screens to see how these can fare in a larger setting and a larger display image. So we do have 150-inch screens coming from Elite. And then later on down the road, I upgraded from a 103-inch non-acoustic transparent screen to a 150-inch DIY acoustic transparent screen from Seymour. And I've been super impressed with it. The build quality alone of the fabric is crazy. No, I have the Center Stage XD.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like a weave, and I even they recommend that instead of when you install it, instead of having the weave just perfectly horizontal, they recommend angling it at I don't know what degrees. But I ordered extra material. You angle it, kind of diagonal, and that prevents, I don't know how you pronounce it, Moire, M-O-I-R-E. It's like
above my level of expertise. I have no idea.
So anyway, they recommend that. And so I did that. But what was interesting, we had bought, because it's a DIY screen, we have my frame is made out of extruded aluminum, and it has a groove in it.
That's how all their screens are, though, right? Seymour's.
I don't know, because again, mine's a DIY screen.
Oh,
like literally, my friend, he found this extruded aluminum for $12.
Oh, okay. So you just got the screen material.
I just bought the fabric.
Seymour. I got you.
Yeah. So this is true DIY. So I ordered the fabric. I think I paid about $360 just for the fabric, which is awesome for a 150-inch screen. He bought two, I don't know, like 12-foot or three 12-foot extruded aluminum pieces for like, I think it's I think I've still got the writing on it. It's like $6 a piece or $12 a piece. It was so cheap. It was great. It's Youth Man deal, man. What do you expect? And so the extruded aluminum has this little groove in it, and so we bought the rubber strips that you would use like on your screened-in porch. And so we're putting this thing in there, and what we didn't realize is the fabric was so thick. Think about when you fold the fabric over and that rubber kind of gets shoved in between the fabric. It was just too much material, and that little thing, we needed a really smaller rubber strip. I don't know what you call that thing. So, dude, I'm like, we're trying everything. I'm dying trying to get this thing in there. It's at the end of our project. We'd spent 107 hours in 7 days building my front cabinet, building that.
I thought you were just saying on the screen. Like,
no.
I don't know if I want to buy a Seymour now. Michael.
No, that was the whole cabinet up front. So that was a massive project. But as we're building the screen, I went in and got a butter knife. And so I'm literally pushing as hard as I can to get that little rubber inside. And I'm thinking, what if I slip, man? We're going to destroy this fabric. It's going to cut right through. And I mean, no matter what we did, that screen is tough, dude. It's tough. So it's a nice woven fabric. So, and the other thing that I was concerned about is when you lift up my screen, I don't have a middle support. So in my brain, I'm thinking, is this thing going to like sag major in the middle? Dude, it doesn't sag at all because it's so taut and because that fabric doesn't really stretch. It's woven fabric. It's fantastic, man. It's fantastic. So I haven't seen any of the other Seymour screens in my setup, so I don't know how those compare. But man, I definitely recommend them. So I'm glad Chris is going to be there. We're super grateful that they're a sponsor of Mwave. I got an email today. I need to respond to another gentleman that works with Seymour, and he's excited about the event. He's really excited about partnering with us. And so should be really, really great time. So I hope you guys can make it out. Any other news on Mwave before we jump into the topic?
I don't think
While you're doing that, I'll look over here at the chat.
I don't think so. Keeping Up with the Joneses says I'm low. Did I fix that? I turned my mic gain down in the software, and then I boosted it in my audio interface. Did that help at all, or am I too loud now? We
should be good.
I don't know.
It's
constantly chasing the dream. But somebody asked, you should try an 8805. I've had an 8805, and I want to say there will be an 8805 at the show, I think. And that's actually a big part of what the topic is today.
Yeah. So we'll be talking about that.
Separates.
Yeah. Let me say hi to some folks in the chat here. Who we got? Project Traveler, Lacar 007. Good to have you, man. Chris, he had to pop in and he left. Rolex. What else we got here? Keeping Up with the Joneses. Tristan's always in the house. Appreciate you, brother. Tunes done by one. I like it, man. Kevin, good to see you, man. Cool, man. So we're going to have some fun tonight. We're going to keep it right at an hour. We're trying to do these pretty consistently once a week. Sunday Night Live, just to kind of hang out with you guys, give you an update about Mwave if we got those. And then we'll just have one topic. And that way we kind of, have an agenda. Not agenda. I guess it's an agenda. Anyway.
It's an agenda.
Yeah. Agenda sounds so negative. Like, oh, what's the agenda?
I don't know that sounds negative. It sounds...
Maybe that's just in politics. Like, there's an agenda.
Kind of sounds snooty. Agenda.
Yeah, man.
But I don't know. Go ahead.
Also, Ryan, if you see any questions, like if I'm talking or whatever, over on the right, you can click the little star button, and that'll star them. So
that you can click them? I can click them.
Well, what I'm saying is if you star them, then up at the very top, we can there's an option that says view the starred ones.
Starred questions.
Yeah. So that's a new
used to this StreamYard stuff.
Yeah, that's a new option that StreamYard added for us. So that's definitely super helpful.
Oh, that wasn't always there?
No. They're continually trying to add, the value to what they have to offer here.
Grayson, we're going to try and do he says, I did not know there was a live stream tonight. We're going to try and do these, like Michael said, every Sunday night.
So at least for now. We're going to try this for
7 p.m. Eastern. We're going to try. Maybe, I mean, I'm already seeing we're approaching double what we've had in the last live stream. So maybe if these get bigger, we may add another one, but right, Ethan?
Oh,
he's
man.
Like, oh, God.
Wow.
We do another one.
I'm doing good to do one, man. So this is a stretch for me, man. It's even though we do this at, with Daily Hi-Fi, it's still a stretch for me to just do a live stream. But I enjoy them, though. I really enjoy them.
Yeah, he really wants to get away from me, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
He can only deal with me so much. He's like, God, I can't deal with this Ryan guy anymore. Please make him go away. Please make him go away. But we should get one last thing. Brian says, Ryan, do you have a YouTube channel? I don't, as it pertains to home audio or home theater right now. And my other channel is heavy combat flight sim, so I don't think it's really conducive to this. I need to set one up. That's on the to-do list for next week. If you guys search for me as Send Audio Video on Facebook, I'm on there, and these live streams are going there. But it's very much a work in progress. So the home theater live streaming stuff is very new to me. I'm not new to live streaming, but this part of it is definitely new. But I think let's jump into that topic and see where we can get before we get derailed anymore.
All right, so tonight we're talking about AVRs versus separates, and there are a lot of people that come onto my channel, and honestly, I was there first. So we're going to hit just real briefly, what are the differences between AVR and separates? Like, what does that even mean? Because you'd be surprised at how many people, they watch my videos and they ask me all the time. They're like, I don't understand. Like, what do you mean by separates? And even what is an AVR? So let's dive into that just real briefly, and then we'll just kind of talk through that. When do you upgrade? Should you upgrade? What are the differences? And maybe share some of our experiences with separates and AVRs.
So AVR, audio video receiver, is an integrated piece of equipment that incorporates video and audio processing as well as amplification. That's the big difference, is the amplification.
It's built into the unit.
It's built into the unit. Typically, they're heavier. They feel like you're actually getting something when you pay the money because they weigh more. Amplification weighs quite a bit. You got heat sinks and all that stuff in the unit as well. An AVP, or pre-pro or processor, audio video processor, takes away the amplification. So you don't have integrated amps inside the unit. So if you're comparing like an 8805 from Marantz to an 8015? Is that right? So the 8015 is integrated. It's got amplification built into it. The 8805 does not. So the 8805 only does audio video processing, and then it shoots out through its pre-outs to dedicated amps. The 8015 does everything internally. Right. That's really the big difference there between the two.
Sure.
But the question always comes up of which one should you get? And is one better than the other?
Sure. So a couple of things, like most of my experience, I've been doing home theater, probably 20 to 25 years now. I built our home theater here about 15 years ago. And at that time, I was just running AVR. I've had some older Onkyo receivers, and we'll use the term AVR and receiver interchangeably during this podcast. So I've had Onkyo. I upgraded that to kind of a more beefier Yamaha at one time. I've had Marantz. I think that's all of the, and I had Harman Kardon as well, back when Harman Kardon were making AVRs.
You're really dating yourself now.
I am, dude. I'm old, man. I'm old. Dude, this right here, this ought to date me enough right here.
Look at this.
See, I don't do that, man. I don't do that.
My hair's fault. I finally convinced my wife to just shave it off. So I feel you. I feel you.
So I've had probably more experience with AVRs than I have separates, with a dedicated processor and a separate amplifier. So I've had a little bit of experience with both, but for the most part, I've always had efficient speakers. And so I've owned a lot of Klipsch over the years. And by efficient, I just mean that it doesn't take a lot of power for them to get loud. So if you were to take, say, for instance, a pair of B&W speakers, a lot of times B&W are around 89 dB. That's the sensitivity rating.
I still think manufacturers are generous with their
So sure. So let's just say you've got a speaker that's 89 dB, and then you have a speaker that is over 100 dB. Like my La Scalas were, and
or JGR or something like that. Yeah,
it's debatable, but my La Scalas were 104 dB.
Good Lord.
Yeah. So think about this. So if we feed let's just say the B&W is 1 watt, put a microphone 3 feet, so 1 meter, and it registers on an SPL meter, the volume is 89 decibels.
Yep.
And then you take this other speaker, my Klipsch La Scalas, and it's showing 104 dB. It just takes a whole lot less volume, and amperage and wattage and all that to get to the same volume. You have to double the amplification just to gain 3 decibels. So if you think about a speaker that's 89 dB, you have to double the power to get to 92 dB, double it again to get to 95 dB, double your power again to get to 98 dB, you see what I'm saying? So we've doubled the power like 6 times to get to the same power. So part of the answer for me, as far as AVRs versus separate, should you upgrade? When do you upgrade? Those types of things is one of my questions to you is what is the sensitivity of the speakers that you're using? If you have really high efficient speakers, and so to me, high efficient would be, I would say like 95 dB and above.
Yeah, mid-90s up.
If you're above 95 decibels, and you can find that information on the manufacturer's website. Go to, whatever.
But even then, there's so many variables that come into the listening distance, right? That's one thing.
That's
your
true.
Room can greatly determine. You may have massive nulls where you need way more power. Room correction, EQ can also require much more power depending on how much of an EQ boost you need at certain frequencies. So I encourage people to be a little bit careful. But I think what Michael's saying is exactly right. Just try and give yourself a little bit of headroom. Don't think, oh, I need 140 watts and my receiver is capable of 140 watts. I'm in the clear.
So
probably not the best idea.
Yeah, let me address that. So I mentioned to you, many years ago, I had a Yamaha. It was a Yamaha RXV 1800. So at that time, that was a $1,200 AVR, which was a lot for me. I'm thinking, so of course I didn't buy it brand new. I bought it on a Youth Man deal, bought it used. I think I paid $400 for it. And so I'm thinking, man, this is awesome. Back then. Yeah, this is, dude, you're dating me even more now.
No, I'm sorry.
So I paid 400. Yeah. So I paid $400 for this thing, and it was rated, I think, at 140 watts per channel. And at that time, I didn't know a lot about. I was still really new to this home theater thing. And I still learn daily. So I never want you guys to think that, oh, Michael's got it all together. No, I don't. I'm figuring this out every single day, and I'm learning something new. But it was 140 watts a channel. And in my brain, I'm thinking, okay, this will send out 140 watts to 7 different speakers at the same time. So originally I was running a 5.1 system. So I had 5 speakers, and this is way before Atmos. So I had 5 bed layer speakers, 3 up front, and then 2 surrounds. Sounded phenomenal. Absolutely loved it. It would go as loud as I needed it to, and I had no issues. And I later found a good deal on a second pair of surrounds. So now I added, instead of just side surrounds, I had side surrounds and back surrounds. So now I moved from a 5.1 to a 7.1. When I added 2 more speakers to that AVR, it was weird, Ryan. It was like it sucked the life out of the experience. And I did not understand what happened. I'm like, how can adding 2 more speakers sound worse? And I didn't understand that. And there was one day maybe somebody mentioned to me in a Facebook group or something, or a forum back then. And they said, you really need to see what did they benchmark this test, as far as how much wattage did it really produce under load. And so I think I found an article I just Googled Yamaha RXV 1800 bench test. And I found a company, I think it was Sound and Vision, maybe. Yeah. And so they would actually measure these things because they've got the equipment. I don't. And they measured it. Yes, it did have 140 watts a channel for 2 speakers. You add 3, a little bit less, add 4. And I think if I remember correctly, I don't remember if it was 5 or 7 speakers that they measured, but when you add that many speakers, it dropped from 140 per channel down to 55 watts per channel. And that's what I didn't realize. Like, you've got one power supply inside an AVR, inside a receiver, that is trying to power 5 speakers or 7 speakers. And nowadays with Atmos, okay, we're doing 9 speakers, 11 speakers, 13 speakers. That's a lot to ask of an AVR.
Right.
So for me, if you've got a low budget AVR and you've got inefficient speakers and you're trying to power like 9 or 11 speakers, I'll be honest, that's not a great combination.
No,
you know,
certain AVRs can do it better than others, and
Correct.
there's certain AVRs that can have more amplification than others. The stat that you really want to pay attention to, depending on the number of speakers you have, is how many watts are delivered by amplification for a certain number of channels. And it's usually stated, but sometimes receivers will say, well, you get 140 watts with 2 channels driven.
Yeah.
Well, how much of a benefit is that?
Yeah.
Not a whole lot, because most people aren't going to buy a receiver for 2 watt for 2 channels.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
That's correct.
It's not.
Yeah.
So that's something that you gotta remember. And usually the higher end amps or AVRs have more power, but
Correct.
you never know. They can go both directions. I saw you post something about reference volume.
Yeah. So Francis says, I guess I'm old because reference levels are a bit too loud for me because it became fatiguing.
Loud.
Francis, I'll be honest with you. I'm typically, when I watch a movie, I like about -10.
Yeah,
Now the other day, me and Jessica watched Spider-Man No Way Home, and I looked over at her. She doesn't like it loud, but I looked over and I said, "Can we turn it up a little bit?" And she was like, "That's fine." So I went to -5. So again, I still don't even go to reference. I just don't like that volume for an entire movie, like 2 hours of listening.
I don't know that people realize how loud that is, because a lot of people I have found rate reference on the volume knob on their AVR saying 0. And that's not necessarily the case. You need to measure what reference is in your room at what sound level. So you may not even be making it to reference, possibly depending on, what your amp's capable of in your receiver or separates or what have you. But also, don't feel bad about you feeling that reference is too loud, because reference is loud. And I don't think a lot of people realize how loud it is.
Yeah. Yeah, Grayson, you're totally correct there. With the AVR adding more speakers, it does limit that, and that the power supply in there can only handle so much, and it can only output so much. So,
well, then you're running into distortion and many other things.
Yeah.
When you're starting to overdrive those amplifiers.
Yeah.
So, but that brings us to a situation where a processor could very well be better, right? If you've got low sensitive speakers, if you have a ton of channels that you need to be able to drive,
correct,
a processor may be more beneficial to you.
Yeah.
So like in the room I've got 24 channels in my showroom, and there's not an AVR that's going to be able to do that. So I was kind of stuck, not really stuck, but I had to go with a processor.
Yeah.
And that's just what you have to do. And somebody I saw earlier in questions, I don't think I tagged it, said there are certain AVRs that you can disable the internal amplification and use the pre-outs.
That is correct.
Absolutely true.
That's
so
correct.
If you're looking at maybe getting an AVR that you don't have to replace over a long time, and maybe you want more channels down the road, having that ability to turn off or utilize preamps for dedicated amplification for, say, your LCRs, while having the AVR run your surrounds or something, that could definitely be something to look into and benefit from.
So one thing I found prime example, some of the newer Denon and Marantz AVRs have what they call a preamp mode. And so in preamp mode, you go into the speaker configuration and you tell it, I want to use this in preamp mode. And so basically it disables all of the internal amplification, turns those off. So in theory, you're supposed to get cleaner processing, cleaner audio, because it's not having to do everything. It's not doing the video switching and the Dolby Atmos, processing, as well as amplification. And so in theory, that's what it's supposed to do. But sometimes those are actually a nice almost like stepping stone. So you use it as an AVR, and then down the road, you're like, I'm thinking about adding amplifications. And so if you want to add amplification to all your speakers, then you can disable that,
right?
Turn off that internal processing, and then just, let those external. So it kind of acts as a processor. The interesting thing, and Ryan and I were talking about this backstage, is I have a video on my channel where I had the Marantz SR8015. So that is a 11.1 channel processor. And so I was using that to power 11 speakers. And then I have my 2 subwoofers. So with that, sounded great. I've always enjoyed that. Because they're basically their flagship AVR. It's got a beefy power supply. Okay. So it didn't have, and my speakers were very efficient. At that time I had the La Scalas. So I had 3 La Scalas up front, 104 dB, sensitivity. So they're easy to drive. They don't take a whole lot of power, and it sounded great. I invited a friend of mine over because this was the first time that a company had sent me a processor to review. I think that was the first one that I got. So Marantz sent me their the AV. Man, now I'm mixing up. I think it was the 7706. This is the 2 I was comparing, SR8015 and the 7706. So we listened to the SR8015. We enjoyed it, unhooked it, recalibrated, reran Odyssey, level matched, did all the things I normally do. And a friend of mine and I sat down, and we thought, being in preamp mode, the SR8015, we weren't using its internal amplification, so that wasn't going to be a factor. The only thing really we were changing was the actual processing of it. In our minds, we felt that we heard much better what I call channel separation, just more distinct information from each channel. Now, the hard part about that, and Ryan and I have talked about this in pretty lengthy discussion earlier, could there be some I don't know if they call it confirmation bias. Like I knew in my brain that
there's a lot of things that you can call
I
it.
know physically that we changed from a AVR to a processor. And so in theory, a processor should sound better, you think, at least that's what marketing tells you.
Notion of what theoretically should sound better. And I think that can play some bias theoretically.
And so could that have been an option? Sure. Could what we have heard been Odyssey honestly calibrating differently? Because I've run Odyssey one time and I was like, ooh, that doesn't sound real great. Run it again. They're like, okay, this sounds better. Well, Odyssey EQ'd it a little bit differently the second time than it did the first. So could that have happened? Sure. So I don't know. Oh gosh. So maybe it did it.
Maybe the things that you got to be careful about, because, and that's, we're going to go back, and this is kind of self-serving advertising for Mwave.
Yeah.
That's why I think Mwave is so important, because we're going to be doing this stuff there. Yeah. And one of the things that I found over the course of me getting into the hobby, and I haven't been into it for nearly as long as Michael, but it's trying to take away that subjectivity, right? So when we're doing amplification and room correction demos and comparisons, what we're going to be trying to do is do instantaneous switching. So you're not hearing any downtime between the switches, because what I've come to find out is we as humans have very short auditory memories.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to something and then you spend an hour and then you come back and you listen to something else, you may have forgotten what the other thing sounded like, and you may have been influenced by X, Y, or Z. So I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong. I'm not saying you can't hear a difference. Amir, actually, on Audio Science Review, he's been professionally trained to be able to hear the difference. He supposedly can. And I know if you listen to clips over and over and over, you can find minute differences and stuff. Is there a measurable difference in this stuff? Absolutely. When you're looking at different amplifiers, different DACs, different components for all of this, the question becomes, can you hear it?
Right.
And that's why M-Wave's important, because we're not going to tell you one way or the other. I want you guys to be able to figure it out on your own and figure out if you can hear a difference. That's awesome.
Great.
You go that direction. If you can't, well, you figured out you may be able to save some money, because either ears may not be able to pick it up, or You may not be listening to whatever it is.
Yeah.
We want you guys to be able to determine what matters to you and then be able to make decisions for yourself, because too long in this hobby, it's been about other people telling others what should or shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
And I want to try and remove that.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. You mentioned about the measurable differences, dude. I got not really blasted and hammered, but I got quite a bit of flack from people saying, well, Amir and Audioholics, they measured the SR8015 and it measured the preamp section measured lower or less or whatever than the processor did. And my thought was, that's great. It may vary. I mean, I'm not discrediting that at all, but my question goes to, can you hear that measurable difference?
That's always my question.
So, and I don't know what made the difference. Again, I never once in the video said, you know, separates is always going to sound better than AVRs, because I don't think that's fair. You can take a crappy, cheap processor that really doesn't measure well, it's not very well designed, put it up against a flagship AVR, and that flagship AVR is going to mop the floor, you know, with it. But so I don't think that's a necessary assessment. I was just sharing from this particular comparison between just these two, this AVR, this processor. This is what we heard. This is what we experienced. You're going to put it in a different room. You're going to calibrate probably a different way than I do. So I can't guarantee that this is going to be, you know, you're going to get the same measurable results and repeatable results. But it was just something, it surprised me. It really, really did, because I didn't expect to hear any difference. Want to give a big thanks to Spillage Village. Appreciate the super chat. What differentiates great, good, or poor performance from an AVR or an amplifier? Is there a number of channels when separates should be used over AVRs? Great question.
So my analysis of this is, when you're looking at AVRs and you're looking at pre-pros, I'm of the camp that I can't hear a difference. I've put my Storm against, I have a Matrix Audio X Saber Pro, which is in the top 5 of Audio Science Reviews DACs. I can't hear the difference. Same amplification. People will say, well, you've got too much distortion and synad and all this other stuff through your amps and blah, blah, blah. If I can't hear the difference, it doesn't matter. So I'm on that camp. I don't try and push it on anybody. My belief in this is my belief, is that you should base your buying decisions on features, right? If the amplifier is able to handle it and it has ample headroom, it's not a terrible amplifier. It was designed in a good way, that it's not intentionally trying to color the audio. It's not trying to do anything negative or anything like that, which in most cases is really all, in my opinion, the AVRs from Marantz, Denon, Yamaha. There's probably some outliers in those. You buy based on features. So if you got a bunch of speakers and there's an amplifier out or an AVR that can do it, and you're not listening at reference, and you've gone through an SPL calculator, you don't have a really weird room, AVR is probably going to work great for you. But if you start
most people, absolutely.
For most people. But if you start moving into situations where you want DTSX Pro, you want Aura 3D, and I realize there's some AVRs that have these, you need obscene amounts of channels. You need ridiculous configurations. You need, your speakers aren't very efficient. Like my Martin Logans that I have, the big channel, my Renaissance up front, dipped down to under half an ohm at 15,000
that's a
hertz.
lot.
I mean, they just annihilate speakers when you start really pushing the volume levels up.
So Ryan, take just a moment to kind of expound on that, because one thing I always try to do on my channel, I want to provide as much value, as much education as possible. And sometimes we throw around numbers like ohms and resistance, and it's like somebody maybe that's new to the home theater space, they're like, I don't even know what that means. So
you're kind
of dive into
the gun.
I know, but I mean, even just in general, most speakers, a lot of times they're rated at 8 ohms nominal impedance.
So typically when you drop in ohms, you get, I'm not really the right person.
Even if you don't know the number, it requires more power from the amplifier.
Usually, you're able to generate more power, but as you get further down, that's the closer you're getting to a short. So my speakers are actually very, very close to shorting out. I mean, they're very close to getting to that point. And that's just a characteristic of the speakers. That's just, you could go on to Martin Logan's website and look at them. And I think it says that like 15,000 hertz is 0.5 ohms. And as you go up, they get lower and lower and lower.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for an amplifier to be able to do that. I don't understand the science behind it. I understand that it's hard enough on my speakers. So I can't really speak any more than that, but there's Wikipedia articles, and I actually think Amir goes and talks about that in some of his videos. So,
and and I'm not super technical either. Typically, all right, when you look at an amplifier rating, this goes back to talking about separates. When you look at an amplifier rating, let's say a Parasound amplifier you're looking at, Parasound will rate an amplifier at say 200 watts at 8 ohms and maybe 350 watts at 4 ohms. So the amplifier is providing more power as that impedance dips down lower and
towards
lower.
A short. Yes.
Yeah.
And
so
if you guys,
and yours went down to 1 ohm. That's crazy.
No, half.
Oh,
under half. So I had a conversation because we were having problems with my speakers shorting out or sending amplifiers in protection. We're like, what is going on?
Yeah.
So I actually called Martin Logan and they said, hey, your speakers are actually dipping down at that point. And that's why it's really important. So my QSCs, I went to Pro Amps for that reason. Will push out 1,700 watts at 2 ohms, and my Martin Logan still pushed them into protection. So
here's an interesting thing. So if you would have used an AVR, I can't think of a single AVR that can handle a half ohm load.
So this is where we talked about SPL earlier. We talked about SPL earlier. I'm not. When you're at lower listening volumes and you were talking about the SPL calculations as you need to double and your listening distance, if you're not listening loudly, and remember for every, what is it? Meter you back up, it requires a doubling.
So yeah, I don't know the exact formula, but basically the further you are, the lower that volume is going. It's going to kind of do like this. You know, your volume is going to go lower. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
The distance?
As you increase distance, it's not 3 meters. I think it's 2 meters. I think it's every 2 meters. I'm probably mistaken.
Yeah,
I haven't looked at that in a while, and I'm sure the chat's like, oh my God, why are you listening to these guys?
Yeah.
But if you're listening at normal listening volumes, right, you're not going to have problems. Could my Martin Logans, my Renaissance work on an AVR? Absolutely.
Okay.
Am I going to be
when
able
you're
to
like
push,
really
am I going to be pushing? Because every time you go up 3 dB, it requires a doubling of power, and that goes up really fast.
Yeah.
Even if I'm listening at, and I think they're 94 dB efficiency.
Okay, so they're decent. Yeah,
they're not terrible. They're not terrible at all.
Yeah,
but 1 watt, then you're going to 2 watts, then you're going to 4, then you're going to 8. And you can see how this exponentially starts to get out of control.
Yeah.
So when you get to something like 100, well, then you're at 200, then you're at 400, now you're at 800.
Yeah.
And when you start bringing EQ into that, and you're starting to need boosts, it gets even worse because you may be boosting past where the normal range is. So it can be very important to have that extra power. So it's very dependent on the listening levels you do. If you want to hit reference, you're going to need a lot more power depending on the speakers, unless you have something like your La Scalas or JTRs that are going to be really efficient.
Sure.
That's going to be important.
Grayson, appreciate the $10 super chat. When buying a new AVR and you're considering whether to buy a last year's AVR or a current year AVR, don't make a mistake that a new AVR is going to have a better amplifier.
That's a great point.
You know, we're not guaranteed by any means. Sometimes Ryan alluded to this earlier, talking about features. A lot of times what we pay for in the latest, greatest of anything is features. They may have utilized the same exact amplifier, you know, the power supply from last year and implement. Now they may have changed it, but they may have very well used the same, you know, power supply, but they've implemented, you know, Oro 3D, or they've implemented DTS-X into this, or maybe they've implemented HDMI 2.1 and things like that. So you're getting features in these new processors and AVRs, but you may not necessarily be getting additional amplification. And so again, that's where it helps to look at the specs, see if anybody's got some measurements out there. There's some great, very knowledgeable people, audioholics. They do measurements. You've got people like Amir from Audio Science Review that does measurements. Yeah. So, I mean, definitely Google, do your search, do your due diligence to see if anybody's got that type of measurements out there. But it doesn't guarantee that, the latest, greatest is actually going to be an upgrade in respect to the amplifier. So good stuff, man. Oh, here's interesting. It says ohm squeezes electrical current, more ohms, more current. Very cool. So that's where the technical side, I don't know exactly what's happening when you have resistance and impedance and you change the ohms. I just remember back in the car audio days, when you would
typically had like 2 ohms, and if I remember right.
Yeah. A lot of times
get the more power of the smaller power supply.
Exactly. You have a small amplifier or an amplifier, that's rated 500 watts a channel. But if you change the resistance by bridging or hooking the 2 subwoofers in parallel, now you're changing the resistance from 2 4-ohm subwoofers when you wire it a certain way. Now the amplifier seeing that as a a 4-ohm. So that would be a 2-ohm load. Now you're getting more power to each subwoofer. So kind of works the same way. But again, I don't know
the mysteries of electricity.
Yeah, that stuff's definitely beyond me. So man, we got a ton of questions, comments. Appreciate you sharing the love, hitting the like button. Definitely lets YouTube know you're enjoying the chat and the conversation. So let's kind of go back to AVRs versus separate. So a lot of guys, we start off with an AVR, and some of the benefits of an AVR, number one, space. You've got one component that has amplification, processing, all your, Dolby Atmos, DTSX, Oro 3D, all that stuff built into it. Your video switching. The AVR is like a hub to me.
Yep.
Everything's going to get plugged into it. Your Apple TV, your Chromecast, your NVIDIA Shield, your Blu-ray player, your Xbox, your PlayStation, all those things get plugged into it. And then the AVR switches between those, and it switches the audio and the video. So if you don't have a whole lot of space, separates isn't going to make sense for you, more than likely. Budget is another consideration. Most of the time, going separates is going to cost you more money, typically. When you look at, and now I don't even know what current prices are because they just keep skyrocketing. They keep going up on processors. But back when I was reviewing the SR8015, I want to say it was around $3,000 for the receiver. To get the equivalent processor, which was the AV7706, it's the one below the 8805. That one at that time was $2,200. So in your brain, you're thinking, man, I can get in a separates a whole lot cheaper. Well, that's $2,200 just for the processor. Now you've got to have amplification for 11 speakers. And so in my case, I have the Monolith 11X. And I think at that time it was about $3,000. I think it's even gone up a little bit more. So now you've added 2,200 plus the $3,000. So now you're at over 5,000 versus a 3,000 AVR. So definitely, budget is something to consider there. Channels, how many channels do you need? If you need a lot of channels, maybe separates is a great way to go, because it gives you that flexibility. There are a lot of 13 channels, 16 channels. I mean, shoot, if you need to, there are 32 channel. How many does your Storm Audio process?
Right now it's configured for 24, but I can go up to 32.
Okay. So, I mean, that's a lot of speakers, man.
It is. It's a lot,
that's crazy.
But you got to think of it this way. When you're going up to that level, there's not really a lot of space for amplification. You got multiple DACs, you got multiple input and output cards. It's just, it's a different animal for what you're trying to do. And again, it goes back to features. I mean, if I was doing an 11 channel, 12 channel, 13 channel theater, I don't think I would, and I wasn't using something like the speakers I would absolutely go towards an AVR if it fit the bill. But since I did what I did, because, you know, maybe I have a screw loose or something, I went with a pre-pro because it ticked the boxes that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Do I think it necessarily sounds better? No. Some of the people the guys here in Kansas City, and I've been in their local theaters,
yeah,
their sound, they have some of the best sounding theaters that I've ever been in. They're miles ahead of Dolby Professional theaters that you would go see a movie in. Why would you go see a movie when this is in your basement? And they're powered by an AVR. They're not
AVRs,
they're not even dedicated amps. So I'm of the mind, like I said earlier, you buy based on features that you want, and like how much power you actually need. So somebody was asking, H2O says, what happens when speakers dip to 4 ohms at certain frequency range and your amp doesn't have enough power? Start running into issues. Your amp can go into protection. You can start to run into massive amounts of distortion if it's not rated that high, if it's still able to push it out. You can just start having problems. You can clip. So you really just want to have headroom, because if your amplifier is running at the limit, you're going to have distortion.
Yeah. So think about this too. So headroom is basically having more amplification than you need. That's always a good thing. Some people say, you know, my speakers are rated at 150 watts is what they say they can handle. So what kind of, you know, amplification should I feed them? I would have zero issue feeding them an amplifier that had 200 watts or 300 watts a channel.
Yep.
Because here's the thing, you're not cranking that thing wide open. You're not ever going to really feed them 300 watts. But what it does allow you to do is give them enough power that amplifier is not even really stressing. And I always go back in high school. I mean, I've never been a big guy. I mean, not big muscular by any means, but I took weight training in high school and really, really enjoyed it. But with weight training, let's just say, for instance, at that time, I could bench press 265 pounds and I weighed 155. So I was a little bitty guy. I mean, I wasn't big at all. But guess what? I could do that once. I mean, that was maxed out. I mean, that's all I had, 265 pounds. There was this other dude in the same class, man, big old joker, man. He would jump on the bench, and if I put him on the 265, guess what? He'd throw it up 10, 15 times and wouldn't even break a sweat. So the difference is I'm giving everything I've got to do it just once. He's like,
that's a great analogy.
He's not even sweating it. And so when it comes to AVRs, when it comes to amplification, having that extra headroom is like just being that big muscular dude. The load, which is whether it's impedance or the load talking about like how loud you want to listen to it, it's able to handle that and go, okay, I'm not even sweating. This is easy for me. Versus this other amplifier that's dying and it's starting to strain to be able to hit that volume level. So that's kind of the way my brain visually wraps around that. And so anytime that you can add more amplification, that's always a good thing. Whether or not you hear a difference, sometimes that's not as clear. You know, I've added amplifiers to my setup to an AVR. And I remember the first time I did it, I don't remember what AVR I was running. I think it was the Yamaha. And I added a Parasound, I think it was an HCA 2205A amplifier. So it's an old school amplifier. At the time, it was 10 years old. And the gentleman lived in Tallahassee, which was about a 4-hour drive for me. And he had listed it, and he was a member of the forum, I think the Clips forum. And so I knew he had a really nice setup. He had Macintosh gear, just beautiful, beautiful, you know, his big old Clips horn speakers. And so I wasn't worried about like, you know, the quality of what he was selling. I knew it was going to be good, but I'm thinking, man, he wants $750 for a 10-year-old amplifier. And so I debated. I tried to negotiate. He didn't budge at all, but I finally made a decision. I'm like, you know what? I'm diving into this thing. And so I drove up there, paid $750, brought it back home, connected it. I believe I heard a difference, but it was not night and day difference. I didn't hook it up and go, holy cow, this is what I've been missing kind of thing. But the great thing, by having that extra power, I knew peace of mind. There's at no volume that my ears would ever want to attain in my setup would I ever have to worry about, that amplifier being able to meet those needs, if that makes sense. So there is benefit in having external amplification. But it always goes back to, do I need? And I think a lot of this hobby, most of it, we don't need. I don't need 418s in my room.
Why not?
But guess what? Because I have them, I can reach any SPL, any frequency that I would ever want. And those JTR subwoofers are not breaking a sweat. Kind of going back to that same analogy versus having 4 10-inch subwoofers, made by, a lesser, lower end, maybe a couple $100 subwoofer, and you're trying to get that same experience. You just physically can't do that.
Right. Yep. I mean, you hit all the nails on the head, and that was an excellent analogy. I really liked that. Somebody had a question about how important is SYNAD. SYNAD,
that was way up there, wasn't it?
Signal to noise ratio, or signal noise and distortion.
I did see the SYNAD, but I gotta find it. Keep going.
It's up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of blown out of proportion, and somebody said something along the lines that they thought it was blown out of proportion too. At a certain point, in my opinion, it stops mattering, because can you hear it? Right. So one way, at least how I understand it, I don't know if I'm saying this the correct way. If I have nothing going on my speakers, and I slowly start to turn the volume up of my amplifiers, at some point over a certain volume, I'm probably going to hear hiss. And that hiss, from my understanding, I think is the signal to noise ratio.
Right. That's what I've heard.
So if I'm clean at 85, which is where you would benchmark for reference, but let's say if I turn it up to 95, I'm not. The question is, can you hear it? Right? Can I hear that? If I'm playing actual audio, can I hear that hiss while everything else is going on? Probably not. But to some people, that's going to matter. Some people, they want the confidence that it's going to be the cleanest signal known to man, and they don't have to worry about the distortion. But in my eyes, if I can't hear it while everything's going on, what does it matter? Signal above power of distortion and noise. That's probably what it stands for.
You guys are rough, man.
Yeah, everybody's rough.
I get excited, and I say things like, because I keep it clean on my channel, man. That's just who I am. And so I'll say things like "holy cow" or "golly."
What's wrong with "holy cow"? The cow's holy. You just say, you got to say what it is.
That's funny, man. Chris, send $10 super chat. Appreciate you, brother. Also, tiny consideration to think of on new equipment. Will it always look pretty with everything else? Both a serious and serious question. Also thinking placement. So yeah, I mean, aesthetics is a big deal too.
To some people.
When it comes to, I mean, let's face it. I almost didn't buy my clipsless Scalas because honestly, I felt they were ugly. Oh,
we're talking about speakers, definitely more than amplifiers.
I think he's talking about new equipment, but I felt the same way with speakers. So to me, you want something that looks nice, that's presentable. And so I think there is some value in that. And some people are willing to pay extra money for something that, all right, let's go to Macintosh. Are they really, really, that much better than maybe a Parasound? Maybe not, but they sure do look cool. You got the little meters. Yeah. And we'll pay a lot of extra money for those types of meters. So, and in regards to placement, I think where you're going with that, if we're talking about the whole thing about separates, is, do you have the ability to even put additional amplifiers in your setup? Ryan's got a big old beautiful rack, which is cool because he can just stack those jokers up. In my case, I'm literally running out of space now. And so that's why I went with an all-in-one 11-channel amplifier. I didn't want to have 3 or 4 different amplifiers because it's just taking up extra space that I don't have in my cabinet, so. But definitely got to keep those things in mind. Yep. So I appreciate that.
I also went a little bit of a different approach because everything I have is pro.
Yeah.
I use all pro amps. I don't use any home theater amps. I did. Yeah. I came from PS Audio BHK 300 special editions, which are they were not cheap. And that was one of the things that led me to be a dealer, was because I felt like I kind of got taken to school buying things that I didn't need. And my Renaissance were actually sending them into protection at a much lower volume. So then I moved to Pro Amps, because we did a Kansas City amplifier amplifier shootout. And we're talking about Audio Science Review. I had the benchmark in, right? So we had the benchmark amplifier, which is supposed to be the benchmark for amplifiers as far as distortion and clean audio.
Yeah.
I couldn't hear the difference
between
all of these other amplifiers. So if you can't hear the difference, at least for me, and again, Mwave is about everybody making their own determinations.
Sure.
If you can't hear the difference, it doesn't matter. And my Behringer A800s, which I have, I think I'm 11 of them, are...
That's a lot of amplifiers, man.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I couldn't tell, and the Behringers are, I think I bought them for $250 a piece.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, the only one that you really have that's a bigger, like a higher end amplifier, was the ones that power up the front ones, because they just demand so much more.
The Behringers can run them, and they do decently well, but I wasn't getting close to reference before they were getting sent into protection.
Yeah, I thought you told me they were shutting down, basically. Like they were running out of gas.
They were.
They couldn't handle it.
Were. Is a Pro Amp a Class D amp? Typically. Yep. So the other benefit I have, because I have so many, and this is actually another really good consideration. If you're going to run a bunch of amplifiers, Class Ds run typically much, much cooler. And because of that, they also run quieter with fans and all of that stuff. So if you need a bunch of amplification, Class D isn't necessarily the worst. What are you laughing at?
This saying that something on your end, your mic is. He sounds fine on my end.
I think it's my connection. I don't think it's the mic. I think it's.
Okay.
That's probably true. I think it's StreamYard, because in the upper left corner, I keep getting like a low connection issue. I blame Michael on that one.
Okay, so try this too. So, okay, try this, Ryan.
We'll worry about it afterwards.
Yeah. All right, I'll tell you. Yeah, because we're almost done.
Yeah,
so
I don't want to bother.
Let me throw this up here. One asked a question or mentioned something earlier. He said, I've tested my KEF R series speakers using both internal amps on my Denon AVR and also via pre-outs from the AVR. So basically, he said, I'm using the AVR itself, and then I've also added external amplification. And honestly, I didn't really hear a difference, and peace of mind is good. To me, the best thing to do is try it. If you have an extra amplifier, and see if it makes a difference in your setup. I have never found that adding external amplification was like night and day, but I've always run speakers that were pretty sensitive, so they don't need a ton of amplification. But I do like having amplification.
Something to remember, though, when you're doing these comparisons, make sure you level match.
Yeah, true.
People have a tendency to consider increase in volume as an increase in clarity and a million other things.
That is
so.
Correct.
Make sure when you're switching, you ensure that the SPL, the volume that's coming out, is the same level between AVR and dedicated amplification. Because if you don't, you may have a preconceived.
You may love your videos on a Denon 6500H. Should I feel feature FOMO compared to the 6700H? Also, oh gosh. So I know with TVs, man, that is way out of my realm. I don't even own a TV. It's kind of crazy. Like in my living room, we've been here. We FOMO, fear of missing out.
Oh, man, maybe I'm the old
guy. Maybe. Hey, you need to watch FOMO's channel, man. FOMO's got a great channel on TVs. So let's see. So I own the Denon 6500. Okay, so you're questioning, should you upgrade to the 6700? Again,
is it
biggest thing
ticking all the boxes for you?
Yeah, just look and see. I mean, I typically, a lot of times I don't upgrade unless I need to upgrade. Maybe there's something that came out, like say Dolby Atmos, and my AVR doesn't have Dolby Atmos. Well, that's a good reason that you might want to consider upgrading. A lot of times just kind of bumping up a couple of notches, you're going to get a little bit better, like power supply, be able to, but if you're using external amplifiers, that doesn't matter. So I don't know.
This is,
I wish I had a good answer for you.
I think people have a tendency to think they need new gear when they don't necessarily do. I hear this with subwoofers all the time. Like, I'm not getting enough deep bass. And then you go back and look at their gain knob and it's like an eighth of the weight turned up. Like, man, you got all this headroom. Turn your bass up. You don't need more subwoofers. Let your subwoofer off the chain. You don't need to add more bass boxes. Just turn the volume up. And people forget that you can just turn the volume up. But going back to what that gentleman was saying, the biggest thing is if you need new features, go for it. TVs, I think it's maybe the TVs are a little bit different. I think displays are a little bit different because you can see a difference, but not always. Not always.
Sometimes the newer ones aren't as good as the older ones. So
yeah, I mean, I still got a plasma kicking in my basement.
There you go. Chris asked, he's surprised we didn't go deep into by-wire bi-amp. So I'll be honest with you. I've only tried it on my end like once, and I didn't hear a difference. So that's how deep I'm willing to go into it. So
Neolists are probably going to have to be bi-amped at Mwave because they just need too much power. So that's sometimes you need it.
Yeah, I don't think just necessarily like hooking up, separating the power from the tweeter to the woofer is going to make it sound better. And again, a lot of people will claim it. But I do wonder, like, what if we set it up like at Mwave and allowed people to see, okay, which one do you like, this or this? And they go, well, I like that. And maybe that was without bi-wiring, or bi-amping. So
there's going to be all kinds of funny things that'll happen. For instance, back to that amplifier shootout, there was a point where we could, and Michael, you've heard this story, I'm sure, where we swore we heard a difference, swore it up and down, and we had a rig where we could turn things on and off really quickly. Arkea on AVS forums made it. God, the man's done amazing things for the AV industry. And swore up and down. We could hear the difference. And madman laughing over in the corner. He was turning the same damn amplifier on and off repeatedly. Just same thing, on and off. And we're like, oh my God, did you hear that?
Yeah.
Same amplifier.
That's whacked, man. That's whacked. But it's interesting.
Subjectivity.
Yeah.
Subjectivity.
Definitely, man. So let's see. Let me see here. So Neil says, that's the issue I'm having, Michael. It's tough to find an entertainment center that fits my huge ATI amp. Yeah. Trying to keep the wife. Yeah, I get it, man. Sawzall. Make it fit. That's hilarious.
They're hard. It's entertainment centers, especially good ones, are very hard to come by. Salamander, I know, makes some, but those can be very expensive. That's a big reason why I went with a rack, because it's then you need space. You need space for it.
Yeah. Michael, I'm not sure what your question is here. Do you need 2 channels for Atmos? So in like an AVR, if the AVR supports Atmos, it'll have dedicated terminals for those speakers. So in my case, I have an 11.1 AVR. So I can have like the way I have it in my setup is I have 7 bed layer speakers. So I have a left, center, right, 2 side surrounds, 2 back surrounds. That's 7. And then I have 4 Atmos speakers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 up front, 2 in the back. And each one of those channels on my processor, well, okay, let me back up. I have a processor, but there's an output for each one of those. Okay. And then in my case, I'm going out of that processor for each one of those channels into an amplifier, and then out of that amplifier to each one of those speakers. If you had an AVR, so again, I'm not sure. I mean, am I reading that wrong, Ryan? Maybe give us some more.
I think we need more context.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the question is there, but yeah, I mean, I always recommend if you can go 4 channels, 4 speakers for Atmos. To me, it's hard to get an enveloping sound when you've only got 2 speakers. It'd be like trying to create surround sound and you only have 2 speakers up front. How can you do that? You kind of can sometimes.
Atmos is a little bit easier though, because
I don't know, man.
Depends on what he does for content. I mean, Disney just royally screws up if you have 4.
I know, but if you've got 2 channels though, and all right, so here's the other thing. Steven from Home Theater Gurus has a great video on like ways that we screw up Atmos. And part of that is if you have too much angle between one speaker and another. So if your side surround is here and your Atmos speaker is 90, man, this is really hard. If your Atmos speaker is like 90 degrees separation, that's a lot of space to fill from going from one speaker to another. So kind of the same thing on your top layer, there may not be the appropriate angles. And so that you'll have to kind of measure out and see. So I'm a big fan of I'm a big fan of 4 Atmos if you can. But yeah, you're going to need 2 channels specifically, one channel per Atmos from your AVR or your processor. So I know you guys got a lot of comments, a lot of questions. Just want to see if he clarified that. Did you mention anything?
I didn't see it.
Okay. Cool.
Trying to make sure we didn't miss anything by scrolling up.
Yes, I mean, so kind of to wrap this up, to me, AVRs versus processor, can you get great, incredible home theater experience with an AVR? 100%. 100%. Do you need external amplification? There's a lot of factors that come into play. Sensitivity of your speakers. How big is your room? If you've got a massive room, you're going to need to crank it up pretty loud. And your AVR may give out a gas. How many speakers do you have? If you only got 5 speakers and 1 subwoofer, you might not benefit that much from having external amplification. You got 11 speakers. Okay. So you might definitely could benefit from that. Do you have the space? Do you have the budget?
There's a lot of considerations.
Do you want the flexibility down the road? So for me, as long as the amplifier is alive and it's functioning and doing its job, there's no need for me to upgrade my amplifier in 5 years.
Yep.
Now in 5 years, is a lot going to change on the processor side? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I would imagine there's going to be a new format. Maybe it's Dolby Atmos 2. Maybe it's DTS-Z. I don't know, So we may have these, maybe Oro 3D will be extinct by then. I don't know.
Yeah. Things can always change.
Inside joke there.
I got a question unpertaining to AVRs and amplifications, but Johnny asked, will an NZ8 have a great picture on a 180 to 190 inch screen?
Yes,
and when you say 25 foot long,
so that's how big the room's 25 foot, 17 feet. So it's a big room, massive screen.
It's a big screen. And
is the NZ8 going to have that?
Is it ideal?
200 inch, man.
That is big. So I was at a Sony.
You do that. I'm going to do this.
I was at the Sony training, and I saw all their new displays. TVs, projectors. I can't talk about what the displays were, what they were doing, but the 380 was there, their $100,000 projector, and all of the other ones were there. The 325 was there, all of them were there, and there was a 190 inch screen, 1.3 gain Stewart Studio Tech 130. Anything around 2,000 lumens. Really anything commercially, I don't know that you're going to be able to light up a screen that's that big. I don't even know that you have enough room to light up a screen that's that big.
All right. So he said, what was the size of the screen? 200?
190.
Okay. So let's do one.
Oh, maybe 200.
Okay. So let's just do 200. Let's just see. So I'm on a website called projectorcentral.com. Up at the very top, you'll see an icon that says throw calculator. From there, you can plug in the projector that you're considering, or maybe a projector that you own. And so I'm going to come over here and type in, I'm going to assume you're doing a 2.35 to 1, maybe a 2.4 to 1 ratio. So I type that in here. And then under image size, I put 200 inch because we know that's kind of what you're looking at. And then I lock this. That's just typically what I'll do. So what this does down here is it shows you, okay, what kind of brightness can you get out of this? And this is, I think, called foot Lamberts.
That's the light coming off the screen.
Yeah. So this is kind of, if you were to have a 200 inch screen, this projector right now is at 28 feet from that. You can see this projector will do a range of 21 feet to 43 feet. And that's basically based on this zoom right here. So as you see, if I start moving this, you can see right here, I'm moving that projector back here, and you can see the diagram here. But if you scroll down, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Y'all able to see that okay? So you can see as I move this, it changes how many foot Lamberts. Okay. So ideally, if you want this thing to be as bright as it can be, you want this projector to be as close to the screen as possible. And you're going to change, the zoom aspect, or not aspect ratio, the zoom internally in the NZ8, so that it's kind of backed out as far as it can. It's zoomed out. And so you're going to get 18-foot Lambert. So, I mean, it's in the green. I don't know exactly what foot Lambert, you need to be at, or what you're supposed to be. And then there's also this screen gain. That's going to depend. If you've got a higher screen gain, like a 1.5, you can see this is going up to 27 foot Lamberts. So that's going to change. But this is just a good calculator. I always recommend people checking that out when you're looking at.
It's a good place to get a start. I think don't base all of your buying decisions on calculators like this, because they can really take you down some unwanted paths. And the reason I say that is because the NZ8, when you're going into, or any projector, when you're getting into images that's that big, you're really going to be pushing the projectors hard.
Yeah.
Not that the projector is going to have to work any harder, but what I mean is the image is going to be a whole lot less bright at that image size, because that is an astronomical increase in screen real estate over what normal people have. I mean, a 190-inch screen,
that's massive.
Enormous.
Yeah.
That is huge.
Yeah. That's a big screen.
That's a big boy. So 190 inches. Brightness, I think people underplay how important brightness is in these equations. I value brightness in my project. I mean, I've got an NZ9 on 120-inch screen. My screen's not enormous. My projector sits right about 12 feet from the screen. And I get, I don't know, 2,500 lumens. So somebody else was talking about, you're probably going to get 2,500 lumens after calibration. You're going to be way lower than that, because what ends up happening, remember that JVC's lumen output calculation, if I remember correctly, is done in full bright, I think. So that is a totally uncalibrated, and you may be able to get 2,500. I guess that may be a good estimate, but you're getting it full bright, which is totally uncalibrated. And that's what they base their stuff on. So just be careful with what you're getting from specifications. And if you want to use the filter, that's another very important factor that Keeping Up with the Joneses just brought up, because you're going to lose like 27% of the lumen output if you put in the DCI.
That's why I don't
filter.
That's why I don't use it. Yeah, I don't use it on mine.
I want my eyeballs to be made from brightness. I need the specular highlights.
I love it.
And man, when they turn on the 3800, because I'm not under NDA on this one, the 38, or not 3800, the 380, Sony's $100,000 projector, that was ridiculous. It felt like it was giving me a sunburn on 190 inches at 80% lumen output. It was unreal. Granted, you need an FDA license to install one, because they're like a level 3 laser emitter.
Interesting. Wow.
I didn't know that either.
Hilarious.
Yeah, that was a good one. But if you need a screen that's that big, I would highly suggest doing something like a Panamorph lens to get 30% increase in light output. Plus even maybe double stacking if you're going that big.
Yeah.
That's you need a lot of light when you start getting up there.
Let's do one more. This is from Vamps TV. Appreciate the $10 super chat. Is going up firing speakers a mistake? I got Best Buy installing my first theater system Friday. Congratulations, bro. That's awesome.
That's exciting.
All right. So to the ceiling. So he's got 8-foot ceilings. I can't do in wall. Mix between DefTech gear and only back up firing. So the hard part with up firing, I think they can work. Are they ideal in every situation? Absolutely not. If you think about this, up firing speakers have a lot, probably the vast majority has to do with angles.
They do.
And so think of like when you're playing pool. When you're playing pool, if you hit the cue ball up against let's say the wall. Oh, let's see if I can do this. Am I going to do it? Look at that right there. Boom. So we hit it at this angle. Well, that's the angle of incidence. It equals the angle of reflection. So it's going to be exactly the same. So when your sound is going up, hitting your speaker or your ceiling, it's going to bounce down kind of in that. Now it's not a linear laser pointer kind of thing. I mean, there is dispersion, but it's heading in that direction. So part of that, the difficulty is what angle are those speakers? You know, you've got up-firing speakers. Are they at a 45-degree angle? Well, that means it's going to hit the ceiling and bounce down at a 45-degree angle. And you're just going to have to visually see, okay, they're 9 feet from me. So you've got to kind of just look at those angles and see, is that going to kind of cover that area? Do you have multiple seating? If you've got multiple seating, it's really hard to cover like 2 rows, or especially 3. I doubt you have 3 rows, but it'd be hard to cover 2 rows accurately with up firing speakers. So I think they definitely offer some challenges. As far as, is it a mistake? No. I think you've got to figure out what works best for your room. Every room has limitations. Every room is not ideal. I have a dedicated theater room, and I have compromises that I've had to make in mine. My rear surrounds are way too high, but I don't have a whole lot of option because I would have to bring them down and mount them to my door. And that's just not ideal. So you got to kind of figure out what works best for you. I would prefer an in ceiling speaker, or maybe an on wall, like speaker angled down over an up firing, because there's just too many variables that sometimes we don't have an option to control with up firing. Can they work? Sure. I think now if your ceilings are vaulted, so if they're at an angle, not ideal for up firing. It really needs to be a flat ceiling. I think the fact that you've got lower ceilings, that probably would be to your benefit than having like 12-foot ceilings or 14-foot ceilings. That's not going to work so well probably with up firing, but I think it can work. Try it in your setup. And if you don't get that immersive Atmos experience, then you may have to look at going, okay, can I install either on wall speakers like height speakers, or can I go with some in ceiling speakers?
I think
Atmos?
This goes back to what I was talking about with people wanting to buy more equipment, buying more subwoofers. And somebody said, well, ideally you want 2 subwoofers. You absolutely do. There's ideals for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I think this kind of comes into play with Vamp's question here about, I'm getting new speakers, Best Buy's installing them. Sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you install something, if it's not working in ideal conditions or in decent enough conditions, it can actually be a detriment to your setup. So if these are not behaving as they should, I don't know that that's really going to be something that you want. I would encourage you to start without them. Start with just the bed layer. See how you like it, and then set them up on your own. Maybe don't have Best Buy do them, because you can literally, typically with those speakers, you buy them, you sit them on top of your front LCRs, and then that's it. So, and then if you don't like them at that point, you can return them. I don't know what the return policy is with having Geek Squad install them.
Yeah.
But my opinion is always try something smaller and then move up, because you don't know if maybe the smaller install was satisfactory. And then when you if you did move up to say up firing Atmos, you have nothing to base the comparison on if you go straight to up firing. I mean, you can disable them, but I would try living without them first, because 1, it's a savings of money. 2, you may find that you don't like them. Some people think Atmos is kind of a charade because they get good sounding effects that seem to come from the ceiling with rebounds and reflections just coming from your bed layer. So I would highly suggest just trying it without them to begin with, and then decide, is this something that I want? Decide, is my room conducive or makes sense for an upgrade like this to happen? Because as Michael was saying earlier, compromises have to happen. And if sadly, not everybody's room or space is able to accept or make good utilization of everything out there. It's just a hard truth, and something that we all have to encounter at some point. So if your room's not ideal, even taking that further, just lost the Dolby Atmos sponsorship.
That's awesome.
If your room's not conducive to doing that, I would suggest starting small and then working up. I've started small and then worked up, and I can't go back. But I have also played with it enough to know that there's plenty of content out there that doesn't even utilize Atmos.
Yeah, that's true.
And if you turn your Atmos speakers off, or just turn everything off with the exception of your Atmos, you find out how little it's playing in a lot of times. So
yeah, it definitely depends on the movie and the content.
Yeah.
Some do it way better. Not every Atmos experiences or Atmos disc or content is created.
Not everything is a demo disc.
100%, man.
Jones, I do have Atmos in my room, and I really do like it. Okay, I do like it. I just gotta. I don't want to push my agenda on everybody. I like people to make their own decisions.
I agree, man. And that's one thing that I've just appreciated with you, and that's one reason why we've kind of partnered together, because we've got kind of the same heart. Yeah, we've got the same. Yeah, we got the same heart. Is that, you know, the answer isn't always buy more. You know, the answer isn't always get something better. Sometimes it's figuring out how to utilize what you have and calibrating it better and learning how to set it up and speaker placement and things like that, or adding acoustic treatment versus, you know, going to a really expensive separate processor. You know, that's might be way down the line in the law of diminishing returns. So, but man, great chat tonight, man. Appreciate having Ryan on and as a guest, and we're trying to do these consistently Sunday Night Live, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Throw a quick plug. If you guys don't know what Mwave is, head over to MidwestAVExperience.com. We've got all the information there. Ryan and I have partnered together to put on our first in-person event for AV, man. Home Theater 2 channel. We've got continual brands that are being added daily. So the best place to do or to know about the latest, greatest on what's happening there is MidwestAVExperience.com. If you can make it out to Kansas City, we'd love to have you. I'd love to get to hang out with you in person. And on May the 1st, we're going to be adding several new VIP experience options. We're going to do a gold VIP experience as well as a platinum VIP experience. So if you're even remotely interested in that, make sure you sign up for the newsletter, because I'll be sending out updates on May 1st with a link to that information. Ryan, any other thoughts before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think it's just great being able to do these. And I think you and I work really well together because it's, as you said, it's the love of the hobby.
Yeah.
And I think we got like minds as far as moving forward. But if you guys can make it out to Mwave, I think it'll be a great time. Put your ears to the test. If you're a firm believer one way or the other, come out and do it. And I think you may be surprised one way or the other. I hope that I'm surprised. I hope that I go in and be like, wow, I had no idea that X, Y, or Z could happen. That's why we do these things, because I don't know of any other expo or gathering that's going to have this level of equipment side by side, but is really doing or allowing these comparisons to happen. So if you guys are in the space, want to come out and hang out with us, or really just want to spend some of those VIP ones, spend the whole weekend with us.
Literally, we'll be hanging out at Ryan's house, and that'd be fun, man. We'll just be kicking it all night long.
Guys, I'm just happy that Michael has me over, has me on. It's a good time, and if you guys can make it out, or we've got the online component coming, so if you guys want to hang out with us online too, that should be a good time. But Michael, it's just as always, great pleasure having you.
Thanks, brother.
Pleasure talking to you. Thanks, chat, for the experience, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Guys, y'all have a blessed week. We'll be catching you in the next video. I've got one coming out. This coming up Wednesday will be another home theater tour, so make sure you're ready for that. That'll take place at noon Eastern Standard Time. Appreciate your love. Thanks so much for all the super chats tonight. Definitely appreciate that. And we'll catch you guys in the next show, as well as the future videos, and hope to see you at Mwave. Have a good one, guys.